There are moments in life when we walk into a situation believing we know what to expect, only to discover we were completely unprepared for what awaited us. This is the story of a Christmas dinner that seemed ordinary on the surface, but concealed years of resentment, hidden agendas, and truths that would shatter everything I thought I knew about the family I had joined. What I experienced that night would test not only my marriage, but my sense of self-worth and dignity. Before we begin this incredible story, please remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you are listening to this story from. Your support means the world to us. The moment I stepped through the front door of the Harrington family home, I felt it, that invisible shift in the air, like the temperature had dropped several degrees despite the roaring fireplace in the living room. My husband Daniel walked ahead of me, his shoulders relaxed, oblivious to the tension I could already sense wrapping around us like invisible threads. It was December 23rd, and we had driven 4 hours from our home in Philadelphia to this sprawling colonial house in Connecticut where Daniel had grown up. The wreath on the door was perfectly arranged with red velvet ribbons, the windows glowed with warm light, and somewhere inside I could hear the faint sound of Christmas music playing. Everything looked picture perfect, like a scene from a holiday card. But I knew better. Daniel had been talking about this trip for weeks, his excitement growing with each passing day. This would be my third Christmas with his family, but the first time we would actually stay at the house instead of at a nearby hotel. He had insisted it was time, that his mother had specifically requested we stay with them this year. At the time, I had agreed, pushing aside the small voice in my head that warned me this was not a good idea. Now, standing in the entryway with my overnight bag in hand, that voice was screaming. His mother, Patricia, appeared in the hallway. She was wearing an elegant cream sweater and pearl earrings, her silver hair styled perfectly. She smiled, but it never reached her eyes. "Hello, dear," she said, her gaze sweeping over me in a way that made me feel like I was being evaluated and found lacking. "I see you wore jeans for the drive. How practical." The word practical sounded like an insult coming from her lips. I forced a smile. "It is nice to see you again, Patricia. Thank you for having us." She did not respond directly to me. Instead, she turned to Daniel, and her entire face transformed. Her smile became genuine, warm, full of maternal affection. "Darling, you look wonderful. Come, everyone is in the living room waiting for you." She placed emphasis on the word "you," as if I were merely an accessory Daniel had brought along. We followed her down the hallway, passing family photos that lined the walls. I noticed there were no pictures of Daniel and me together, even though we had been together for 5 years and married for 2. Every other family member was represented, their smiling faces captured in various celebrations and milestones, but not us, not me. The living room was elegantly decorated with a massive Christmas tree in the corner, its branches heavy with ornaments that looked expensive and fragile. Daniel's father, Robert, stood by the fireplace talking with Daniel's older brother, Marcus. His sister, Caroline, sat on the sofa with her husband, both holding glasses of wine. They all looked up when we entered. "There he is," Robert said, his voice booming with genuine pleasure as he crossed the room to embrace Daniel. "About time you got here, son." The greetings were warm and enthusiastic, everyone talking at once, asking Daniel about work and the drive and whether he was hungry. I stood slightly behind him, waiting for someone to acknowledge my presence. Finally, Caroline glanced my way. "Oh, hello. I almost did not see you standing there." It was not an apology. It was an observation delivered with a small smile that suggested she had seen me all along. "Hi, Caroline," I said, keeping my voice pleasant. "It is good to see you again." She nodded vaguely and turned her attention back to her brother. I had met Daniel's family several times before. The first meeting had been awkward but not terrible. The second had been at our wedding, where Patricia had spent most of the reception making subtle comments about how young I was compared to Daniel, despite the fact that he was only 3 years older than me. The third had been at Marcus's birthday party last spring, where I had spent the entire afternoon feeling invisible. This, however, felt different. There was something more deliberate about the way they were excluding me, more calculated in their coldness. Daniel finally noticed my discomfort. "Mom," Do you want to show us to our room so we can put our bags down? Patricia's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. Of course. Follow me. She led us up the stairs to a bedroom at the end of the hall. It was clearly a guest room, decorated in neutral tones with minimal personality. Patricia opened the door and gestured inside. I put fresh towels in the bathroom, she said. Dinner. We'll be at 7. We dress for dinner in this house. I glanced down at my jeans and sweater, suddenly feeling underdressed, despite the fact that we had just arrived from a long drive. Thank you, I managed to say. She left without another word. Daniel set his bag down and looked around the room with satisfaction. This is nice. Much better than staying at a hotel, right? I wanted to tell him that no, it was not better, that I already felt uncomfortable and judged and unwelcome, but I could see how happy he was to be home, how relaxed he seemed now that we were here. I did not want to ruin that for him. Sure, I said instead. It is nice. He came over and wrapped his arms around me. I know my family can be a bit formal, but they will warm up. You will see. This is going to be a great Christmas. I rested my head against his chest and said nothing. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to think that everything would be fine, that I was just being overly sensitive or reading too much into innocent comments and awkward social dynamics. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. We spent the next few hours unpacking and getting ready for dinner. I changed into a dark blue dress that I hoped would meet Patricia's standards, applied makeup carefully, and styled my hair. When I looked in the mirror, I looked presentable, even elegant, but I still felt like I was preparing for battle rather than a family dinner. When we came downstairs at 7, the dining room table was set with fine china and crystal glasses. Candles flickered in silver holders, and the smell of roasted meat filled the air. It looked beautiful, like something out of a magazine spread. Everyone was already seated when we entered. Patricia sat at the head of the table with Robert at the opposite end. Marcus and his wife sat on one side with Caroline and her husband across from them. 2 empty seats remained between Caroline and Robert. Those were clearly meant for us. Daniel pulled out my chair for me before taking his own seat. I smoothed my dress and placed my napkin in my lap, aware that Patricia was watching my every move. The meal began with polite small talk. Robert asked Daniel about his work as an architect, and Marcus discussed a recent business trip. The conversation flowed easily among them, punctuated by laughter and shared memories I had no part in. I ate quietly, occasionally trying to contribute to the conversation, but finding my comments either ignored or met with brief, dismissive responses. Then Caroline turned to me with a smile that did not seem genuine. So, tell me, what exactly do you do again? I always forget. I'm a graphic designer, I said. I work for a marketing agency in Philadelphia. Oh, how nice, Patricia said in a tone that suggested it was anything but nice. That must keep you quite busy. No wonder you and Daniel have not started a family yet. The comment hit me like a physical blow. We had been trying for a baby for over a year with no success. It was a source of private pain that we had not shared with his family. The fact that Patricia had brought it up so casually, as if it were a simple choice we were making, felt cruel. Daniel's hand found mine under the table and squeezed. We are focused on our careers right now, he said evenly. There is plenty of time for that. Patricia made a humming sound that conveyed clear disapproval. Your cousin Elizabeth just had her 3rd child. She is younger than both of you. I felt my face flush with embarrassment and anger. I wanted to defend myself, to explain that starting a family was not as simple as Patricia seemed to think, that there were medical challenges we were dealing with, but this was not the time or place for that conversation. Marcus jumped in, apparently sensing the tension. Speaking of Elizabeth, did you hear she and her husband are buying that house on Maple Street? The one with the big yard. The conversation shifted, and I was grateful for the reprieve. But the damage had been done. I could barely taste the food on my plate as I mechanically went through the motions of eating. After dinner, we moved back to the living room for coffee and dessert. I found myself sitting alone on a chair near the window while the rest of the family clustered together on the sofas, their conversation flowing around me like I was not even there. Daniel was showing his father something on his phone, both of them laughing at whatever it was. Caroline and her husband were discussing vacation plans with Marcus. Patricia sat in her chair like a queen holding court, occasionally interjecting comments or questions that kept the conversation focused on family matters I knew nothing about. I sipped my coffee and looked out the window at the dark night beyond. Snow had started to fall, tiny flakes drifting past the glass. I wished I was anywhere but here. Then Patricia spoke, her voice cutting through the other conversations. You know, we were all quite surprised when Daniel announced he was getting engaged. The room went silent. Everyone turned to look at her. She smiled, that same cold smile that never reached her eyes. It was rather sudden, was it not? You had only been dating for 3 years. Daniel's jaw tightened. 3 years is not sudden, Mom. Well, Patricia continued as if he had not spoken. We had always imagined Daniel would end up with someone more like Jennifer. You remember Jennifer, do not you, dear? She was looking directly at me now. I did not know who Jennifer was, but from the way Daniel went rigid beside me, I could tell this was significant. Mom, Daniel said, his voice carrying a warning. She ignored him. Jennifer was so lovely. She came from such a good family, and she and Daniel had known each other since childhood. We all thought they would end up together. Did not we, Robert? Robert looked uncomfortable but nodded. They were close for many years. Whatever happened to her? Caroline asked, her tone suggesting she knew exactly what had happened. She got her degree in law from Yale, Patricia said. Then she moved to Boston and started working for one of the top firms there. She is doing remarkably well. Still single, last I heard. The implication was clear. Jennifer was the one who got away, the one who would have been the right choice, the one Patricia had wanted for her son. And I was the consolation prize, the wrong choice, the outsider who did not belong. I set my coffee cup down carefully, afraid my shaking hands would betray how much her words had hurt me. Daniel looked like he wanted to say something, his face flushed with anger or embarrassment or both. But before he could speak, Marcus changed the subject, asking Robert about something related to his business. The moment passed, and the conversation moved on as if nothing had happened. But something had happened. A line had been crossed, and everyone in that room knew it. I excused myself shortly after, claiming I was tired from the drive. Daniel started to get up to come with me, but I shook my head. Stay, I said quietly. Spend time with your family. He looked torn, but eventually nodded. I made my way upstairs to the guest room and closed the door behind me. Only then did I allow myself to really feel the weight of everything that had happened that evening. The subtle jabs, the deliberate exclusions, the comparison to this mysterious Jennifer who was apparently everything I was not. I sat on the edge of the bed and tried to process it all. This was not just typical in-law tension or the normal awkwardness of family dynamics. This was deliberate. Patricia and the rest of his family had made it clear that I was not welcome here, that I did not measure up to their standards, that I was not the daughter-in-law they had wanted. And the worst part was knowing that we still had 2 more days here. 2 more days of this treatment, of feeling like an intruder in their family, of being constantly reminded that I would never be good enough. I heard footsteps in the hallway, and then a soft knock on the door. Daniel opened it and came in, his expression troubled. I am so sorry, he said, sitting down beside me. I did not know she was going to do that. Do what? I asked quietly. Compare me to your ex, or make it clear that I will never be as good as this Jennifer person. He ran his hands through his hair, clearly frustrated. Jennifer was not my ex. We dated briefly in college, but it was nothing serious. My mother always had this fantasy that we would end up together, but that was never going to happen. Did you love her? No. He took my hand. I love you. You are my wife. You are the one I chose. But your family did not choose me, I said. They made that very clear tonight. He could not argue with that because we both knew it was true. We sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the faint ticking of a clock somewhere in the house. Maybe we should leave tomorrow, I finally said. We could tell them something came up, that we need to get back. No, Daniel said firmly. We are staying. Running away would only make things worse. My mother was out of line tonight, and I will talk to her tomorrow. But we are not letting them drive us away. I wanted to believe that talking to Patricia would help, that she would somehow realize how hurtful her behavior had been and change. But I knew better. People like Patricia did not change, especially when they believed they were in the right. Still, I nodded. For Daniel's sake, I would stay. I would endure whatever else his family had planned for me over the next 2 days. But as I lay in bed that night, listening to the wind rattle the windows and the old house creak and settle around us, I could not shake the feeling that things were going to get much worse before they got better. I had no idea how right I was. I woke up the next morning to find Daniel's side of the bed empty. The pillow still held the indent of his head, but the sheets were cold, meaning he had been gone for a while. I checked my phone and saw it was already 9:30. I had slept later than I had intended, exhausted from the emotional weight of the previous evening. Through the window, I could see the snow had continued overnight. Everything outside was covered in a pristine white blanket that made the world look clean and peaceful. Inside this house, however, I knew peace was the last thing I would find. I got dressed and made my way downstairs, following the sound of voices coming from the kitchen. When I entered, I found Patricia, Caroline, and Caroline's sister-in-law already gathered around the island, drinking coffee and discussing plans for Christmas Eve dinner. They all looked up when I walked in, and the conversation stopped abruptly. "Good morning," I said, trying to sound cheerful despite the knot in my stomach. Patricia glanced at the clock on the wall. "We usually start breakfast at 8:30 in this house. The men have already eaten and gone." "Out? Gone out?" I asked, pouring myself a cup of coffee from the pot on the counter. "Robert wanted to show Daniel and Marcus the new addition he is planning for the back of the house," Caroline said. "They will be out there for hours, knowing them. So I had been left alone with the women of the family. Perfect. There are some pastries in the box on the counter," Patricia said, returning her attention to the notebook in front of her. "Help yourself." I took a croissant and sat down at the small breakfast table by the window, deliberately choosing a spot away from their gathering. I was not about to insert myself where I clearly was not wanted. They resumed their conversation, discussing menu items and seating arrangements as if I were not even there. I ate my breakfast in silence, looking out at the snowy backyard and wondering how I was going to survive another day and a half of this treatment. "So, Patricia," Caroline said, her voice taking on a tone that made me instantly alert. "Have you heard from Jennifer lately?" My hand tightened around my coffee mug. "Oh yes," Patricia replied, her face brightening. "We had lunch just last month when she was in town visiting her parents. She looked absolutely radiant. She was telling me all about this important case she is working on, something involving international corporate law. Quite impressive. She always was brilliant," Caroline's sister-in-law added. "I remember when she and Daniel were together in college. They looked so perfect as a couple." "They did," Patricia agreed with a sigh. "I had such hopes for them. But then Daniel went off to graduate school and they drifted apart. Such a shame." I felt my cheeks burning. They were doing this deliberately, having this conversation within my hearing, making sure I understood that they thought Daniel had made a mistake by choosing me instead of this perfect Jennifer. "Well," Caroline said, lowering her voice but not enough that I could not hear. "Sometimes people settle for what is convenient rather than waiting for what is right." The words hit me like a slap. I set my coffee mug down carefully, afraid I might throw it if I held it any longer. I wanted to say something, to defend myself, to tell them exactly what I thought of their cruel little performance. But what would be the point? They wanted a reaction from me. They wanted me to lose my composure so they could label me as emotional or dramatic. I would not give them that satisfaction. Instead, I stood up, placed my dishes in the sink, and walked out of the kitchen without a word. I heard Caroline laugh softly as I left, a sound that made my blood boil. I found myself back in the guest room, pacing the floor and trying to calm down. This was worse than I had imagined. Last night had been uncomfortable, but at least Daniel had been there. Now I was alone with these women who clearly despised me, and they were not even trying to hide it anymore. I pulled out my phone and texted Daniel. "Where are you? I need to talk to you." Several minutes passed with no response. I sent another message. "Please, call me when you get a chance." Still nothing. I sat down on the bed and tried to think rationally about the situation. I had two choices. I could stay in this room and hide for the rest of our visit, or I could go back downstairs and face them. Neither option was appealing, but hiding felt cowardly. Before I could decide, there was a knock on the door. I opened it to find Caroline standing there, with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "We are going out to do some last-minute shopping," she said. "Would you like to come along?" It was phrased as an invitation, but something about the way she said it made it feel more like a test. "Sure," I said, forcing myself to smile back. "That sounds nice." 30 minutes later, I found myself in the back seat of Patricia's luxury sedan as we drove toward the upscale shopping district in the nearby town. Patricia drove, while Caroline sat in the passenger seat. Caroline's sister-in-law had decided to stay behind, claiming she had phone calls to make. The shopping district was beautifully decorated for the holidays, with garlands and lights strung across the streets and festive displays in every window. Under different circumstances, I might have enjoyed the outing, but as we walked from store to store, I quickly realized this was not about shopping at all. It was about making sure I understood my place. In the first boutique, Patricia picked up an elegant cashmere scarf and showed it to Caroline. "This would look lovely on you, dear. You have always had such wonderful taste." Caroline preened under the compliment. "Thank you, Mother. You taught me well." They moved through the store together, examining various items and discussing them in detail. I trailed behind them, occasionally looking at things but mostly trying to stay out of their way. At one point, I picked up a beautiful silk blouse and was examining the price tag when Patricia appeared beside me. "That is rather expensive, is it not?" she said, her tone suggesting that I could not possibly afford it. "I have not decided if I want it yet," I replied evenly. She made a small humming sound and walked away. In the next store, a high-end home goods shop, Caroline picked up an ornate picture frame. "Oh, this would be perfect for that photo of Daniel from his graduation." She showed it to Patricia, who nodded approvingly. "Yes, that would be lovely. We should get it." I wandered over to look at some candles, trying to find something I could contribute to the conversation. "These smell wonderful," I said, picking up one with a vanilla scent. Patricia glanced over. "We prefer unscented candles in our home. Fragrances can be overwhelming." Of course they did. We continued like this for another hour, moving from store to store while Patricia and Caroline bonded over their shared taste and their shared disdain for anything I showed interest in. Every comment I made was either ignored or contradicted. Every attempt I made to engage in conversation was shut down. Finally, we stopped at a small cafe for lunch. We were seated at a table by the iron window, and a waitress came over to take our orders. "I will have the Caesar salad with grilled chicken," Patricia said. "Same for me," Caroline added. I scanned the menu quickly. "I will have the soup of the day and a half sandwich, please." After the waitress left, Patricia leaned back in her chair and fixed me with a look that made me feel like I was under examination. "So," she said, "tell me about your family. Daniel has mentioned them." So little. It was not a question born of genuine interest. It was a probe, looking for weaknesses. "There is not much to tell," I said carefully. "My parents live in Ohio. My father worked in manufacturing before he retired, and my mother was a teacher. I have one younger brother who is in the military." "How interesting," Patricia said in a tone that suggested it was anything but interesting. "And what do they think of Daniel?" "They like him very much," I replied. "They were happy when we got engaged." "And your wedding," Caroline interjected. "It was quite small, was it not?" "We wanted something intimate," I explained. "Just close family and friends." Patricia took a sip of her water. "Our family has always believed in traditional celebrations. When Marcus got married, we had over 200 guests. It was a beautiful affair. The implication was clear. My wedding had been inadequate, not up to their standards." "I am sure it was lovely," I said quietly. The food arrived, providing a temporary reprieve from the interrogation. We ate in relative silence, but I could feel them watching me, judging every bite I took, every move I made. Halfway through the meal, Patricia's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and her face lit up in a way I had never seen before. "Excuse me, I need to take this," she said, standing up from the table. She walked a few steps away, but I could still hear her side of the conversation. "Jennifer, darling, how wonderful to hear from you. Yes, we are all doing well. Oh, you are thinking of coming home for New Year? That would be delightful. You simply must join us for dinner. I insist." She continued the conversation for several more minutes, her voice warm and animated in a way it never was when she spoke to me. When she finally returned to the table, she was practically glowing. "That was Jennifer," she announced to Caroline, as if I had not already figured that out. "She might come visit for New Year. Would that not be wonderful?" "Oh, how lovely," Caroline gushed. "I would love to see her again." It has been too long. They spent the rest of lunch discussing Jennifer's accomplishments, her charm, her beauty, and how everyone who knew her just adored her. Every sentence felt like another knife being twisted in my chest. I pushed my half-eaten sandwich around my plate and said nothing. What was there to say? They had made their position clear. Jennifer was the daughter-in-law they wanted, and I was just the woman who had gotten in the way of that dream. By the time we returned to the house, I was emotionally drained. The men still had not returned from their inspection of the property, and I retreated to the guest room once again, desperate for a few moments of peace. I tried calling Daniel, but it went straight to voicemail. I texted him again, asking when he would be back, but got no response. I felt trapped. Trapped in this house with people who hated me. Trapped in a situation I had no control over. Trapped in a family that would never accept me. I thought about how this had all begun. How Daniel and I had met 5 years ago at a mutual friend's party. I had been immediately drawn to his kindness, his intelligence, his easy laugh. We had spent the entire evening talking, and by the end of the night, I knew I wanted to see him again. Our relationship had developed naturally, without drama or complications. We had moved in together after 2 years, gotten engaged after 3, and married the following year. It had all felt right, like we were meant to find each other. But now, sitting alone in this cold guest room, I wondered if Daniel had ever told his family how we met, how we fell in love, how happy we were together, or had he simply announced one day that he was getting married, leaving them to imagine the worst about me. The door opened and Daniel finally appeared, his cheeks flushed from the cold, snow still clinging to his jacket. "There you are," he said cheerfully. "Sorry I have been out so long. Dad has all these plans for the renovation, and he wanted to show us every detail. I need to talk to you," I said quietly. His smile faded as he took in my expression. "What happened?" I told him everything. The conversation in the kitchen about Jennifer. The shopping trip where his mother and sister had made me feel small and unwelcome. The lunch where they had spent the entire time praising his former girlfriend while barely acknowledging my existence. As I spoke, I watched his face change from confusion to disbelief to anger. "I cannot believe they did that," he said when I finished. "That is completely unacceptable. Your mother invited Jennifer to come visit for New Year," I added. She seemed thrilled about it. Daniel stood up and began pacing the room. "I am going to talk to her right now. This has to stop." "Wait," I said, grabbing his arm. "What exactly are you going to say?" He looked at me, his jaw set with determination. "I am going to tell her that she needs to treat you with respect, that you are my wife and she needs to accept that, and that Jennifer has nothing to do with our lives anymore." I wanted to believe that would work, that a simple conversation would fix everything. But I knew Patricia better than that now. She was not the kind of woman who responded well to being told what to do, especially not by her son. "Maybe we should just leave," I suggested again. "We could say there is a work emergency or something." "No," Daniel said firmly. "We are not running away. This is my family, and they need to learn to accept you. I will make sure they understand that." He left the room before I could protest further, and I heard his footsteps descending the stairs with purpose. I sat on the bed, my heart pounding, wondering what was about to happen. Part of me hoped Daniel would be able to get through to his mother, that he would stand up for me in a way that would finally make a difference. But another part of me, the part that had been watching and learning over the past 24 hours, suspected that confronting Patricia would only make things worse. I heard raised voices from somewhere downstairs, not shouting, exactly, but intense conversation that carried through the old house. I could not make out the words, but I could hear the tone. Daniel sounded frustrated and angry. Patricia sounded defensive and dismissive. The argument went on for several minutes before suddenly stopping. Heavy footsteps climbed the stairs, and then Daniel burst back into the room. His face was flushed and his hands were shaking slightly. "Well?" I asked. "She says, she has been nothing but welcoming to you," he said, his voice tight with suppressed anger. "She claims you are being oversensitive and that she is just trying to include you in family traditions." I stared at him. "She said that. She also said that if we were so unhappy here, perhaps we should reconsider staying for Christmas. So now she is trying to drive us away," I said bitterly. Daniel sat down heavily on the bed beside me. "I do not know what to do," This is my family. I never thought they would treat you this way. I took his hand. I know you love them, and I know you want us all to get along. But Daniel, they do not want me here. They made that very clear today. He did not argue because he could not. The evidence was overwhelming. We sat in silence for a long moment, listening to the house settle around us and the distant sound of someone moving around downstairs. Let us just get through Christmas, I finally said. 2 more days. We can manage that. And then we go home and we do not come back until they are ready to treat me with basic respect. Daniel nodded slowly. I am sorry. I am so sorry you have to deal with this. It is not your fault, I told him, even though part of me wondered if it was. Had he ever really stood up for me before? Had he made it clear to his family from the beginning that I was important to him, that I was here to stay? Or had he simply hoped everything would work itself out without him having to take a firm stand? I did not know the answer to that question. But as evening approached, and we prepared to go back downstairs for dinner, I knew one thing for certain. This Christmas was going to be even worse than I had imagined, and something told me the worst was yet to come. Christmas Eve dinner was an elaborate affair. Patricia had outdone herself with the preparations. The dining room table was set with what must have been the family's finest china, crystal glasses that caught the candlelight, and a centerpiece of fresh flowers and evergreen branches that looked like it had been professionally arranged. I had dressed carefully, choosing a burgundy dress that was elegant but not too formal, conservative but flattering. I had spent extra time on my makeup and hair, determined not to give Patricia any reason to criticize my appearance tonight. When we came downstairs, the family was already gathering in the living room for pre-dinner drinks. Robert was pouring wine while Marcus and his wife chatted with Caroline and her husband near the fireplace. Everyone was dressed beautifully, looking like they had stepped out of a catalog for upscale holiday entertaining. Patricia appeared from the kitchen wearing a black silk dress and an elegant necklace that must have cost more than my car. She surveyed the room with satisfaction, her gaze lingering on me for just a moment before moving on. Dinner will be ready in 15 minutes, she announced. Daniel, would you help your father bring up that bottle of champagne from the cellar? I want to make a toast before we eat. Of course, Daniel said, following his father toward the basement stairs. That left me alone with everyone else. I accepted a glass of wine from Marcus and found a spot near the window, trying to make myself as unobtrusive as possible. Caroline came over, her smile sharp. That is a nice dress. Is it new? Thank you, I said. Yes, I bought it a few weeks ago. How lovely, she replied. I always think burgundy is such a bold choice. Not everyone can pull it off. Before I could respond, she had already turned away to talk to her sister-in-law. I took a long sip of my wine and reminded myself that I only had to endure this for one more evening, and then Christmas morning before we could leave. When Daniel and Robert returned with the champagne, Patricia called everyone to the table. We took our seats in the same arrangement as the previous night, with me once again positioned between Caroline and Robert. Patricia stood at the head of the table, champagne glass raised. She waited until everyone was quiet and looking at her. I want to thank you all for being here tonight, she began. Christmas has always been the most important time of year for our family. It is when we come together to celebrate our traditions, our values, and our bond with one another. She paused, her gaze sweeping across the faces around the table. This year has brought changes, as all years do. But through everything, this family remains strong because we know who we are and what matters most. We do not compromise on the standards that have guided us for generations. I felt my stomach clench. Every word she spoke felt aimed directly at me. So, let us raise our glasses to family, to tradition, and to the values that define us. May we always remember what truly matters. Everyone raised their glasses and repeated, to family. I lifted my glass mechanically, the champagne tasting bitter on my tongue. The meal began, and platters of food were passed around the table. Roasted duck, asparagus with hollandaise sauce, scalloped potatoes, fresh rolls. Everything looked exquisite and tasted like ashes in my mouth. The conversation flowed easily among them, full of inside jokes and shared memories. Caroline told a story about a childhood Christmas when Daniel had accidentally broken an ornament. Marcus recalled the year their grandfather had dressed as Santa. Patricia smiled indulgently at these reminiscences. occasionally adding her own details. I ate silently, feeling more invisible with each passing minute. Then Marcus turned to Daniel. "So, have you given any more thought to that partnership opportunity at the firm?" Daniel nodded. "I have been considering it. It would mean longer hours, but the financial benefits would be significant." "That is wonderful news," Patricia said, her face brightening. "A partnership at your age is quite an accomplishment." Caroline leaned forward. "Would that mean you would need to travel more?" "Possibly," Daniel admitted. "There are a few projects in other states that I might need to oversee personally." "How exciting," Patricia said. "Although I imagine that would be difficult for your wife, being alone so much." She looked at me as she said this, and I understood immediately what she was doing. She was trying to drive a wedge between us, suggesting that my needs would hold Daniel back from advancing in his career. "I am sure we would manage," I said evenly. "I support Daniel in whatever he wants to do professionally." "Of course," Patricia replied smoothly, "although I suppose it would be easier if you had children to keep you occupied during his absences. Have you given any more thought to starting a family?" The question hung in the air like a weapon. Everyone at the table went quiet, sensing the tension. Daniel's hand found mine under the table. "We have discussed it," he said carefully, "but the timing has to be right for both of us." Patricia took a delicate sip of her wine. "I only ask because time does pass quickly. You are both getting older. I would hate for you to wait too long and then have difficulties." The words were like a knife twisting in an open wound. She knew. Somehow, she knew about our struggles to conceive. Whether Daniel had told her in a moment of weakness, or she had simply guessed, I could not say. But she knew, and she was using it against me. "Mother," Daniel said, his voice carrying a warning, "that is not appropriate dinner conversation." "I am simply expressing a mother's concern," Patricia replied innocently. "I want grandchildren before I am too old to enjoy them. You have Marcus and Caroline for that," I said quietly, unable to stop myself. Patricia's eyes narrowed slightly. "Yes, but they are not Daniel's children. Every mother wants to see all her children become parents." The implication was clear. She did not consider any future children of mine to be truly part of the family. They would be tainted by my presence, by my inadequacy, by the fact that I was not the woman she had wanted for her son. I set my fork down, my appetite completely gone. My hands were shaking, and I had to clench them in my lap to keep anyone from seeing. The conversation moved on, but I barely heard it. I was too focused on trying to maintain my composure, on not letting them see how much their words had hurt me. Dinner dragged on for another hour. When dessert was finally served, an elaborate chocolate torte with raspberry sauce, I could barely manage a few bites. After dinner, we returned to the living room for coffee. Patricia announced that she had a gift she wanted to give everyone before Christmas morning. She disappeared into another room and returned carrying a stack of wrapped packages. She distributed them one by one, saving mine for last. Everyone else opened theirs to reveal matching family photo albums, beautifully bound in leather with gold lettering on the cover. Inside were pictures spanning decades, carefully organized and labeled. They all exclaimed over them, flipping through pages and pointing out favorite memories. I opened mine to find the same album, but as I flipped through it, I realized something that made my blood run cold. Every single photo included Daniel and his family, birthday parties, holidays, vacations, graduations, hundreds of pictures documenting the Harrington family history, but there was not a single photo of me, not one from our wedding, not one from the few family gatherings I had attended, nothing to indicate I had ever been part of this family at all. I looked up to find Patricia watching me, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "I hope you like it," she said sweetly. "I spent months putting these together for everyone. It is beautiful," I managed to say, closing the album carefully. "I noticed you did not include any recent photos," Marcus said, flipping toward the end of his album. "Oh, I stopped it 2 years ago," Patricia explained. "I wanted to focus on the family history, the foundation of who we are, before things changed." The emphasis on those last 3 words was unmistakable. I felt something inside me break. All evening, I had endured their subtle cruelty, their pointed comments, their deliberate exclusions. But this was different. This was Patricia literally erasing me from the family narrative, creating a record that suggested I did not exist or did not matter. I stood up abruptly. "Excuse me, I need some air." I walked toward the front door, grabbing my coat from the closet on the way. Behind me, I heard Daniel call my name, but I kept going. I needed to get out of that house before I said something I would regret, before I let them see me cry. I stepped out onto the front porch and closed the door behind me. The cold air hit my face like a slap, shocking and clarifying. Snow was still falling softly, covering everything in a blanket of white that seemed to muffle all sound. I walked down the steps and out into the yard, my shoes sinking into the fresh snow. I did not care that I was ruining my good shoes, or that snow was beginning to accumulate on my coat and hair. I just needed to be away from them, away from their judgment, and their cruelty, and their absolute certainty that I did not belong. The front door opened behind me, and I heard footsteps crunching through the snow. "Hey," Daniel said softly, coming to stand beside me. "Are you okay?" I laughed, a bitter sound that had no humor in it. "Am I okay? Your mother just gave everyone a family album with hundreds of photos, and I am not in a single one. She erased me completely." "I know," he said quietly. "I saw that. Did you?" I turned to face him. "Because it seems like there is a lot you are not seeing. Daniel, your family has been cruel to me since we arrived. They have compared me to your perfect ex, criticized everything about me, questioned our marriage, brought up our fertility issues in front of everyone, and now this. I confronted my mother earlier. He protested. I told her she needed to stop, and clearly that worked so well. I shot back. She just got worse." He ran his hands through his hair, looking frustrated and helpless. "I do not know what else to do. This is my family." "I know it is," I said, my voice breaking. "But I am your family too. I am your wife. And right now, you are standing here making excuses for them instead of protecting me." The words hung between us in the cold night air. "That is not fair," Daniel said. "I have been trying to make this work. Have you?" I challenged. "Or have you been trying to keep everyone happy without taking a real stand? Because from where I am sitting, you keep hoping this will all work itself out without you having to choose sides. I should not have to choose sides," he said, his voice rising. "You are all supposed to be my family, but we are not all treating each other like family," I said quietly. "They are treating me like an unwelcome stranger, and you keep expecting me to just accept that." He did not respond, and in his silence, I found my answer. "I love you," I said, tears finally spilling down my cheeks. "But I cannot do this anymore. I cannot keep subjecting myself to their cruelty while you stand by and do nothing." "I am not doing nothing," he insisted. "Then what are you doing?" I asked. "Really, Daniel, what are you actually doing to change the situation?" He opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, the front door opened again. "Daniel," Patricia called out, "could you come help your father with something?" He looked torn, glancing between his mother and me. "Go," I said tiredly. "Go help." "Your father, we are not done talking about this," he said. "Yes," I replied. "We are, at least for tonight." He hesitated for another moment, then turned and walked back toward the house. I watched him go, watched him choose them over me once again, even if he did not see it that way. I stood alone in the snow, my entire body shaking from cold and emotion. I had never felt more alone in my life, and the worst part was knowing that tomorrow was Christmas Day. Tomorrow, I would have to go back inside that house, smile through breakfast and gift opening, pretend everything was fine while they continued their campaign to break me down. I did not know if I had the strength to do it, but as I stood there in the cold darkness, something shifted inside me, something hard and determined that replaced the hurt and confusion. They wanted to break me. They wanted me to give up, to leave, to prove them right about my inadequacy. But I was not going to give them that satisfaction. I was going to survive this Christmas, and then I was going to make some decisions about my marriage and my future that did not involve seeking approval from people who would never give it. I walked back toward the house, my jaw set with new resolve. One more day. I could do this for one more day, and then everything was going to change. Christmas morning arrived with deceptive tranquility. Sunlight streamed through the guest room window, illuminating the snow-covered landscape outside and making everything look peaceful and beautiful. If only the atmosphere inside matched the scenery. I had barely slept. Daniel and I had not spoken much after coming back inside the previous night. We had gone to bed in strained silence, each lost in our own thoughts. He had reached for my hand at one point, but I had pulled away, not ready to forgive his inability to truly stand up for me. Now, as I got dressed for Christmas morning, I felt numb. The hurt from yesterday had crystallized into something harder, something protective. I was going to get through today with my dignity intact, and then we were leaving. I had already decided that, with or without Daniel's agreement. When we went downstairs, the family was already gathered in the living room around the Christmas tree. Presents were piled underneath, wrapped in expensive paper with elaborate bows. The scene looked like something from a magazine spread. "Merry Christmas," Patricia said when she saw us, her tone pleasant, but her eyes cold as they met mine. "Merry Christmas," I replied automatically. We settled into our designated spots, and the gift exchange began. Patricia played hostessy, distributing presents one by one, making sure everyone had their moment to open something while the others watched. Marcus received a new watch from his parents. Caroline got a set of sapphire earrings. Their spouses received thoughtful gifts that showed Patricia had paid attention to their interests and preferences. When it came time for Daniel's gifts, Patricia handed him several boxes. He opened them to find a cashmere sweater, and a first edition book he had mentioned wanting months ago, and an expensive pen set for his office. "Your mother always knows exactly what to get you," Caroline said warmly. Finally, Patricia picked up a small box and handed it to me. "This is for you, dear." I took it cautiously, aware that everyone was watching. I unwrapped it carefully to find a generic gift card to a department store chain. No personal thought, no consideration of my interests or preferences. Just a card that said she had fulfilled her obligation to get me something. "Thank you," I said, managing to keep my voice steady. "I thought you could pick out something you like," Patricia explained. "I was not sure of your taste." The implications stung. After 2 years of marriage, she still had not bothered to learn anything about me. "It is very practical," I replied, using the same word she had used about my jeans when we arrived. Something flickered in her eyes. She had caught the subtle jab, but she could not call me out on it without looking petty. Daniel handed me the gift he had gotten for me. I opened it to find a beautiful necklace with a pendant that matched my wedding ring. It was thoughtful and personal, clearly chosen with care. "It is beautiful," I said, and I meant it. Despite everything happening with his family, Daniel himself had not failed me in this moment. "I am glad you like it," he said, leaning over to kiss my cheek. I saw Patricia's expression tighten slightly. Even this small display of affection between us seemed to bother her. The gift exchange continued for another 30 minutes. When it was finally over, Patricia announced that breakfast would be ready soon and disappeared into the kitchen with Caroline following behind her. I excused myself to use the bathroom, but instead found myself wandering toward the back of the house where a small study was located. I needed a moment alone, away from all the forced cheerfulness and underlying tension. The study was quiet and lined with bookshelves. Family photos covered one wall, and I found myself drawn to them, studying the faces of people I barely knew, but was supposedly connected to through marriage. I was so focused on the photos that I did not hear someone enter behind me until they spoke. "She keeps those because they represent the family she wanted." I turned to find Robert standing in the doorway. Daniel's father had been relatively quiet during my visit, not participating in the cruelty, but not stopping it either. "What do you mean?" I asked carefully. He came further into the room and stood beside me, looking at the same photos. Patricia had very specific ideas about how our lives should unfold, what Daniel should study, what career he should pursue, who he should spend his life with. When things do not go according to her plan, she has difficulty adjusting. "That does not excuse how she has treated me," I said quietly. "No, it does not," Robert agreed, surprising me, "but it might help you understand it." He picked up a photo from the desk, one showing a younger Daniel with a pretty blonde woman. I recognized the setting as the backyard of this very house. "This is Jennifer," he said unnecessarily. She was everything Patricia wanted in a daughter-in-law. Right family background, similar social circle, shared values and expectations. When Daniel ended things with her to pursue his own path, Patricia took it as a personal rejection. "So I am being punished for not being Jennifer," I said bitterly. "In a way, yes," Robert acknowledged. "But more than that, you represent Daniel making choices for himself instead of following the path Patricia had laid out for him. That is what she really cannot forgive." I looked at him directly. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I have watched what has been happening since you arrived, and it is not right." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Patricia is my wife, and I love her, but she can be controlling and cruel when she feels she is losing control of a situation. I should have said something earlier. I should have stopped her." The admission surprised me. It was the first time anyone in this family had acknowledged that their treatment of me had been wrong. "Why did you not?" I asked. He sighed heavily. "Because it is easier to keep the peace than to confront her. Because I have spent 35 years learning to pick my battles. Because I am a coward." The last word was said with such self-disgust that I almost felt sorry for him. "What happens now?" I asked. Robert looked at me with something like respect in his eyes. "That depends on you and Daniel. But I will tell you this. If you leave here and never come back, I would not blame you. And if you decide to stay in Daniel's life but keep your distance from us, I would understand that too." Before I could respond, Caroline appeared in the doorway. "Breakfast is ready," she announced, her gaze moving suspiciously between her father and me. "We will be right there," Robert said. Caroline lingered for a moment longer, then left. Robert turned back to me. "Whatever you decide, I hope you know that not everyone in this family is against you." It was a small gesture, but in that moment, it meant everything. We went to the dining room where breakfast had been laid out. The meal passed in relative quiet, everyone seeming subdued after the morning's activities. I picked at my food, my mind racing with everything Robert had told me. It did not excuse Patricia's behavior, but it did provide context. She was not just being cruel for the sake of it. She was fighting to maintain control over a life that was not hers to control. As I sat there, I realized something important. I had been approaching this situation all wrong. I had been trying to win Patricia's approval, to prove myself worthy of being part of this family, but that was never going to happen, because the problem was not actually about me. It was about Patricia's inability to accept that her children were adults who made their own choices. And once I understood that, I felt the weight of the past few days begin to lift. After breakfast, I went back upstairs and began packing our bags. Daniel found me 20 minutes later, folding clothes and placing them methodically in our suitcase. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Packing," I replied calmly. "We are leaving, but we were not supposed to leave until tomorrow." "Plans change," I said, continuing to pack. "I have endured 3 days of disrespect and cruelty from your family. I am not staying for one more minute." He closed the door behind him. "I know this has been difficult. Difficult." I stopped packing and turned to face him. "Daniel, your mother has spent this entire visit making it clear that I do not belong here. She has compared me to your ex, questioned our marriage, erased me from family photos, and given me a gift card while everyone else got thoughtful presents. And through all of it, you have done nothing meaningful to stop her." "That is not true," he protested. "I talked to her. Once," I said. "You talked to her once, and when it did not work, you gave up. You chose the path of least resistance because confronting your mother is uncomfortable for you." His face flushed. "You do not understand how complicated this is." "You are right," I agreed. "I do not understand why you cannot tell your mother that she needs to treat your wife with respect, or you will not be coming back. I do not understand why you keep expecting me to endure abuse so you do not have to deal with conflict." He sat down on the edge of the bed, his head in his hands. "I do not want to lose my family. You are not going to lose your family," I said more gently, "but you need to set boundaries with them. And if you cannot do that, then we have bigger problems than just this visit." He looked up at me, and I saw real fear in his eyes. "Are you saying you want to end our marriage?" "I am saying that I married you, not your family. But if you cannot separate yourself from their toxic behavior, if you cannot put our relationship first, then yes, we need to seriously reconsider things." The words hung heavy in the air between us. "I love you," he said quietly. "I do not want to lose you." "Then prove it," I replied. "Come downstairs with me right now and tell your mother that we are leaving because of how she has treated me. Tell her that she needs to apologize and change her behavior, or we will not be coming back." He was silent for a long moment. That silence told me everything I needed to know. I went back to packing, blinking back tears. I had given him a clear choice, and he was unable to make it. "Wait," he finally said. "You are right. About all of it. I have been avoiding conflict with my family at your expense, and that is not fair to, you." I stopped packing and looked at him. "Let me talk to them," he continued. "Really talk to them this time, and if they cannot accept you and treat you with respect, then we leave and we do not come back until they can." For the first time in days, I saw real determination in his eyes. "Okay," I said quietly. "But Daniel, if you go down there and let them talk you out of this, we are done. I mean it." He nodded, standing up with new resolve. "I understand." He left the room, and I heard his footsteps going downstairs. Then I heard voices, muffled at first, then growing louder. I moved closer to the door so I could hear better. Daniel's voice carried up the stairs, firm and unwavering. "This ends now. The way you have treated my wife this entire visit is unacceptable, and I will not tolerate it anymore." Patricia's response was sharp. "I have done nothing wrong. If, she is too sensitive to handle family dynamics. That is not my fault." "Family dynamics." Daniel's voice rose. "You have been deliberately cruel to her. You brought up Jennifer constantly. You excluded her from conversations. You gave her a gift card while everyone else got personal gifts. You even made a photo album without a single picture of her in it." There was a moment of silence. Then Patricia spoke again, her voice icy. "That woman is not part of this family's history. She is a temporary disruption who will eventually disappear from our lives." The words hit me like a physical blow, even though I was not surprised by them. Daniel's response was immediate and forceful. "She is my wife. She is the most important person in my life. And if you cannot accept that and treat her with basic human decency, then you leave me no choice." Another pause. "We are leaving today," Daniel continued, "and we are not coming back until you can apologize to her and commit to treating her with respect." "I mean it, Mom. Choose." I held my breath, waiting for Patricia's response. When it came, her voice was cold and final. "Then I suppose we will not be seeing much of you anymore." My heart sank. She had called his bluff, certain he would back down. But Daniel did not back down. "I guess not," he said quietly. "Goodbye, Mother." I heard footsteps on the stairs, and then Daniel appeared in the doorway. His face was pale but determined. "Let us go," he said. "Let us go home." We drove away from the Harrington house in silence. The snow had stopped falling, and the afternoon sun made everything sparkle like the world had been covered in diamonds. It should have been beautiful, but all I could see was the pain etched on Daniel's face. He gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles white, staring straight ahead at the road. I wanted to say something comforting, but I did not know what words would help. He had just walked away from his family for me, and I knew how much that must have cost him. We were about an hour into the drive when he finally spoke. I should have done that 2 days ago. His voice was rough with emotion. "You did it when you were ready," I said quietly. "That is what matters." He shook his head. "No, you were right. I kept choosing the easy path, hoping everything would work itself out without me having to take a stand. I let you suffer because I was too scared to confront my mother. Daniel." I reached over and placed my hand on his arm. "You confronted her today. You chose us. But at what cost?" He glanced at me briefly before returning his eyes to the road. "My mother basically disowned me." "She did." "Not disown you," I corrected gently. "She gave you an ultimatum, and you made your choice. That is on her, not you." He was quiet for a moment. "Do you think she will ever change?" I considered the question carefully. "I do not know. But even if she does not, we will be okay. We have each other." His hand found mine and squeezed. "I am sorry I did not protect you from the beginning. I am sorry I let it get this bad before I finally stood up for you. I appreciate you saying that." I told him honestly, "And I forgive you. But Daniel, this cannot happen again. If we have children someday, I need to know you will protect them from this kind of treatment too." "I will," he said firmly. I promise you, nothing like this will ever happen again. We drove the rest of the way home talking about what came next. We agreed that we would not reach out to his family until they were ready, to apologize and genuinely change their behavior. We would not pretend everything was fine just to keep the peace, and we would build our own traditions, our own definition of family that was not dependent on their approval. When we finally pulled into our driveway in Philadelphia, the sun was setting. Our little house looked warm and welcoming, the Christmas lights we had hung before leaving still twinkling in the twilight. Home, Daniel, said Al, and the relief in his voice was palpable. We unloaded the car and went inside. The house was cold from being empty for several days, but it felt like a sanctuary after the hostility of the Harrington home. I am going to make us some hot chocolate, I said. The real kind, with actual chocolate and milk, not that instant stuff. That sounds perfect, Daniel replied, starting to build a fire in our small fireplace. As I stood in our kitchen melting chocolate and warming milk, I felt the tension of the past few days finally beginning to release from my shoulders. We were home, we were safe, and we were together. I brought the hot chocolate into the living room where Daniel had gotten a fire going. We curled up together on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, and just sat in comfortable silence. This is nice, he said after a while. Just us, quiet and peaceful. It is, I agreed. This is what Christmas should feel like. He kissed the top of my head. I love you, and I'm sorry you had to go through that. I love you too, I said, and I am proud of you for standing up for us. We spent the rest of the evening talking, really talking, about everything we had been through and everything we wanted for our future. We talked about boundaries we would set with his family if they ever came around. We talked about how we would handle holidays going forward. We talked about our hopes for children and how we would protect them from toxic family dynamics. It was the most honest conversation we had ever had, and it brought us closer than we had been in months. 3 days later, on December 28th, my phone rang. It was Robert. I hesitated before answering, but something made me pick up. Hello. Hello. It is Robert. His voice sounded tired. I hope I am not disturbing you. No, it is fine. What can I do for you? He took a deep breath. I wanted to apologize for what happened, for not speaking up sooner, for not stopping Patricia's behavior. It was wrong, and I am sorry. Thank you, I said, genuinely touched. That means a lot. I also wanted you to know that your leaving made an impact. Patricia has been quiet these past few days, really thinking about what Daniel said. I cannot promise she will change overnight, but I think she is beginning to understand that she pushed too far. I appreciate you telling me that, I replied. But Robert, any reconciliation needs to come with genuine change, not just words. Daniel and I are not going to subject ourselves to that treatment again. I understand, he said, and I think that is exactly right. You deserve respect, and I hope Patricia will come to realize that before it is too late. We talked for a few more minutes before ending the call. When I told Daniel about it, he looked thoughtful. My father never stands up to my mother, he said. The fact that he called means this really did shake things up. Maybe, I said cautiously, but we are not going to rush back into anything. They need to prove they have changed before we consider visiting again. Agreed, Daniel said. The weeks passed, and we settled into our life together with a new sense of peace. We spent New Year's Eve at home, just the two of us, toasting to new beginnings and better boundaries. We made plans for the year ahead that did not revolve around anyone else's expectations. In mid-January, a package arrived at our door. It was addressed to both of us in Patricia's handwriting. Inside, I found a letter and a small box. My hands shook slightly as I opened the letter and began to read. The letter was not long, but it was honest in a way I had never expected from Patricia. She acknowledged that she had treated me poorly, that she had been holding on to a vision of Daniel's life that was not his to live. She admitted that her behavior had been cruel, and that she understood why we had left. She wrote that she was working on accepting that Daniel had made his own choices, and that if she wanted to be part of his life, she needed to respect those choices. The letter ended with a direct apology to me, and a request that, when we were ready, we might consider giving her another chance. In the box was the family photo album she had given me for Christmas, but this time, when I opened it, I found that she had added new pages at the end. Photos from our wedding, pictures from family gatherings I had attended, even a few candid shots of Daniel and me together that I had not known existed. She had put me back into the family narrative. I handed the letter to Daniel, and he read it silently, his expression unreadable. "What do you think?" he finally asked. "I think this is a start," I said carefully. "But it is just a start. She needs to prove through her actions that this is genuine. Do you want to give her that chance?" I thought about it for a long moment. Eventually, yes, but not right away. Let us give it time. Let her show us that this change is real before we put ourselves in that situation again. Daniel nodded, relief evident on his face. That seems wise. It was 3 months before we agreed to meet Patricia and Robert for lunch at a restaurant halfway between their home and ours. Neutral territory. Limited time. A chance to see if the changes were real. Patricia was subdued when we arrived. None of the cold superiority I had experienced at Christmas. She greeted me politely, looked me in the eye, and asked genuine questions about my work and interests. It was awkward, but it was not hostile. As we ate, Patricia told us about changes she had been making in her life. She had started seeing a therapist to work on her need for control. She had been reading books about healthy family boundaries. She acknowledged that she had a lot of work to do. "I know I cannot undo the damage I caused," she said, looking directly at me. "But I want you to know that I am committed to doing better. You are important to Daniel, which makes you important to me." I should have seen that from the beginning. It was not a perfect apology, but it was sincere. Over the following months, we took small steps toward rebuilding the relationship. Short visits, always on our terms, always with clear boundaries in place. Patricia was not perfect, but she was trying, and that effort meant something. By the time our first anniversary of that terrible Christmas arrived, things were not back to normal because normal had never been good, but they were better. We had established a new normal built on mutual respect and clear communication. Daniel and I were stronger for having gone through that experience. We had learned to stand up for ourselves, to protect our relationship, and to not compromise our dignity for the sake of keeping peace. And when I found out in late spring that I was finally pregnant, when we shared that news with Daniel's family, Patricia's joy seemed genuine. More importantly, her first words were not about herself or her expectations. They were congratulations to us. It would be a long road to fully healing the relationship, and I knew there would be setbacks along the way, but we had proven something important that terrible Christmas. We had proven that love without respect is not enough, that family should lift you up, not tear you down, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from toxicity, even when it is hard. I never forgot what that Christmas taught me. It taught me my own worth. It taught me that I deserve to be treated with dignity. And it taught me that real love means standing up for the people you care about, even when it is uncomfortable. As I sat in our living room the following December, decorating our own tree with Daniel, our home filled with warmth and laughter and genuine joy, I realized something profound. That terrible Christmas had been a gift after all. Not the gift I wanted, but the gift I needed. It had shown me who I was and what I deserved. It had strengthened my marriage. And it had taught me that sometimes the worst moments lead to the most important growth. I would never choose to go through that experience again, but I would not trade the lessons it taught me for anything, because now I knew exactly who I was and what I stood for, and that knowledge was worth more than any Christmas dinner at a fancy table could ever be.